Now, I'm going to read a document that mysteriously appeared by an anonymous author. It's called The Gospel According to Andrew. Now, the birth of Heino Ambros took place this way. An angel appeared to his father in a dream, saying, "Your wife will bear a son, and you shall call his name Heino, for he will deliver the students of Blue Earth State University from their ignorance." And it came to pass that Heino Ambros was born in a small Estonian town. He was not born of a virgin, however, since no virgins could be found in Estonia. Heino Ambros grew up and usually walked in the path of righteousness. When he was a young man, an angel appeared to him in a dream and said, "Rise, flee to Sweden, for the Nazis have drafted you, and you must avoid this evil. The path to Sweden is dangerous, but I will guide and protect you along the way, for the Lord has plans for you." So Ambros went to Sweden, guided by the angel, and this was to fulfill what was written by the prophet, "Out of Estonia I have called my son." After Ambros had spent some years in Sweden, he went to the United States. He got a bachelor's degree from TCU, his master's degree from SMU, and he did his doctoral studies at Columbia and NYU. He was then called to teach political science at Blue Earth State. And this was to fulfill what the angel had told his father in the dream. Ambros taught the students in truth and righteousness and delivered them from ignorance. And it came to pass that Ambros went all about Blue Earth and performed many miracles, such as teaching students to question and think on their own. And great crowds followed him from Morris Hall and Armstrong Hall and the Student Union and the Square Deal and from beyond the Minnesota River. Seeing the crowds, he went to the Highland campus and opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "For most students, the dominant feature in the years of their schooling is the grade. They live, breathe, and grow up in the world of grades. Grades dull the inner natural desire to learn, to explore, and to grow. They produce coercion and various forms of intellectual prostitution, encourage a mechanical and trivial type of learning, prevent penetrative thinking, stifle creativity, destroy the real motivation that grows out of genuine interest and curiosity, put learners in competition against each other in a harmful way, produce an atmosphere of hypocrisy, fear, and stress, and generate an enormous underworld of cheating. Students who play the good grade game subject themselves to the same kind of education as a monkey who is educated to push a particular lever for the specific reward of a banana. Grades are the university's bananas. But students shouldn't be treated like monkeys. Students in universities should be treated like adults. There are no grades once they get out of college. And if we want them to continue learning later in life, we ought to let them labor for their own sense of accomplishment when they are still with us in college. Grades are bunk. They should be abolished or at least de-emphasized. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And when Ambros finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one who had authority and not as the other political scientists. Ambros's saying angered his peers in the political science department, so they took counsel how to entangle him in his talk, how to destroy his career. Professor Mark Iscariot, who was a traitor, walked up to him to try to trap him by what he said, and this was to fulfill the prophecy, "Fear not, Blue Earth State, Behold, your prophet is standing next to an ass. And Mark asked him, why do you fail to organize, integrate, and relate student presentations to the subject matter of the course? Ambros replied, saying, what is a subject matter? Is it a thing? How do subject matters come into existence? Do they grow? If so, how? Do they reach maturity and eventual death? Where do subject matters reside? In course description booklets? In university catalogs? In books? In people's heads? Why do we teach subject matters? And why are students required to study them? And Mark gnashed his teeth because he could not answer any of these questions. Then Mark said, look, Heinz, you issue far too many A's and B's. Tighten up your grading. I will check your grade distribution at the end of the quarter in order to make sure that you have heeded my admonition. Ambros nodded his head and left. After spring quarter, Mark looked at Ambros's grading and said, behold, Ambros has issued a sizable number of C's, D's, and NC's. I'm absolutely elated. Mark was so pleased that he sent a scroll dated June 21st, 1973, to the Vice President for Academic Orthodoxy. The scroll was read aloud, quote, it is gratifying to be able to draw your attention to the grades which Heinz turned in for the past spring quarter. You will agree that he is responding in the direction requested of him. Let us rejoice at the prodigal son. And Mark ordered the secretary of the political science department, saying, quick, bring the fatted calf, kill it, and let us eat and be merry, for Heinz was dead, and he has come to life. He was lost, and he is found. So they began to make merry. Now, Professor Oxgoad was in his office, and as he came near the faculty lounge, he heard the music and merrymaking. So summoning the secretary, he asked what this meant. She told him, Heinz has tightened up his grading, and Mark killed the fatted calf to celebrate. This angered Oxgoad, and he would not go in. Mark came out and tried to appease him, but he replied, I have never neglected any of your orders, and yet you have never given me so much as a kid to let me make merry with my friends. But as soon as Ambros, who has been very extravagant in issuing A's and B's, tightened up his grading a little bit, you killed the fatted calf for him. Mark said to him, my son, you and I are always together. All I have is yours. We could not but make merry and rejoice, for Heinz was dead, and he has come to life again. He was lost, but he is found. Ambros fell out of favor with the political science department during spring quarter of 1974. Several political scientists were hedging on the red-hot controversy over student representation on the department's personnel committee. Some were saying one thing publicly while working for exactly the opposite behind closed doors. So at a departmental meeting, Ambros demanded a roll call vote on the question, forcing each political scientist to state publicly his position. This greatly angered some of them. After the meeting, Mark Iscariot, who was one of the 12 political scientists, walked up to him and admonished him, saying, you shall pay for this. You shall regret this. Mark then went to the State University Board attorneys and said, I seek to deliver Ambros to you. And the attorneys were exceedingly pleased, and from that moment, Mark sought an opportunity to betray him. But when they tried to fire him, they feared the students because they held him to be a prophet. In the summer of 1974, Mark arranged for 3 wise men from the north, headed by John of the Ivory Tower of Minnesota, to evaluate Ambros during the 1974-75 school year and to submit a scroll. For John was held by the political scientists to be a prophet. The 3 wise men submitted their scroll on May 28, 1975. They listed some weaknesses in Ambros's teaching, but the political scientists were very disappointed because the 3 wise men had found so many things in his teaching that were laudable. The political scientists gnashed their teeth because John did not say that Ambros was incompetent, for they had hoped that John would call for his dismissal. Alas, cried the political scientists, John would not be our stooge, so he is no longer our prophet. On August 6, 1975, Oxgoad inscribed a stone tablet with the following words: John's scroll is superfluous, inconclusive, and of little help in making a final determination about Dr. Ambros's teaching practices. Now, Oxgoad had advocated Ambros's firing for years. In a scroll dated March 23, 1973, he wrote that Ambros should be fired, not promoted. In the stone tablet dated August 6, 1975, he wrote, "My first recommendation is that Professor Ambros be terminated immediately." However, at the departmental meeting on October 17, 1975, he said unto Ambros, "Heinz, we have been leaning backwards and try to help and protect you from getting fired." For Oxgoad heeded not the proverb, "Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight." And he was not the only one in the department who heeded not that proverb. As Ambros sat at a table in the square deal, behold, many dope addicts, alcoholics, and sinners came down with him and his disciples. And when the political scientists who were on their way to Michael's looked in the door and saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher drink with dope addicts, alcoholics, and sinners? Professors should be drinking at Michael's, not at the square deal." But when he heard it, he said, "I came not to teach those with doctorates, but students. Go on to Michael's and let me teach." And when the political scientists had left, Ambros said, "Bartender, we'll have another pitcher." And then he told them a parable, saying, "The animals of the forest decided that they needed to prepare themselves for the real world, so they organized a school. They adopted an activity curriculum consisting of running, climbing, swimming, and flying. To make it easier to administer the curriculum, all of the animals took all of the subjects. The duck was excellent in swimming, in fact, better than his instructors, but he made only passing grades in flying and was very poor in running. Since he was slow in running, he had to stay after school and also drop swimming in order to practice his running. This was kept up until his webbed feet were badly worn and he was only average in swimming. But average was acceptable in school, so no one worried about that, except the duck. The rabbit started at the top of his class in running, but had a nervous breakdown because of so much makeup work and swimming. The squirrel was excellent in climbing until he developed frustration in flying class, where his teacher made him start from the ground up instead of from the treetop down. He also developed Charlie horses from overexertion and then got a C in climbing and a D in running. The eagle was a problem child and disciplined severely. In the climbing class, he beat all the others to the top of the tree, but insisted on using his own way to get there. At the end of the year, an abnormal eel that could swim exceedingly well and also run, climb, and fly a little had the highest average and was the valedictorian. and everybody marveled at this parable. The bartender was so astonished that the next round of drinks was on the house. The political scientists gathered in the office of the department chairman and took counsel together in order to deliver Ambros by stealth and fire him. But they said, "Let us not fire him during the school year, lest there be a tumult among the students." So they decided to sit in on Ambros's classes during the school year that they might trump up some charges. And it came to pass that on November 3, 1975, Professor Matthew, who was thought to be very shrewd and whose wife was also a political scientist, evaluated Ambros's democracy and education class. A student gave an oral report and documented that 55% of white high school graduates go on to college. The student then jokingly said, "Therefore, 45% of blacks must go to college since percentages must add up to 100. The whole class, including Ambros, burst out laughing at this joke. The whole joke went right over the head of Professor Matthew, a man without humor, who wrote down in his evaluation form, "Ambros made no attempt to correct this error." Matthew then submitted this incident as evidence that Ambros should be fired. For Matthew believed that Ambros was either too dull-witted or too incompetent to correct this obvious error, and that students are so stupid that they are unable to detect such errors without being spoon-fed by a professor. Incredible as it sounds, Professor Matthew's testimony was swallowed hook, line, and sinker by President Pilate, who was to fire Ambros. Many years after the conclusion of the Ambros affair, professors and administrators looked back on the case and wondered if the wrong man was charged with incompetence.